After the United States reported its second largest bank failure in its history with the collapse of the Silicon Valley Bank, United States President Joe Biden has guaranteed that the banking system in the country remains resilient. He emphasized that Americans should have faith in the U.S. banking system, also going on to say that he wants tougher regulations to prevent such crises in the future. Biden added that the government is ensuring that the Silicon Valley Bank depositors get their money back and that no losses will be borne by the taxpayers. The remarks come after the collapse triggered panic among investors as SVB suffered a loss of over $80 billion with a 60% decline in its stock price in the last 1 week. So what exactly happened? How is it going to affect the world, especially India? CNN News 18's Ridhima Bhatnagar explains.
What really led to the collapse of the Silicon Valley Bank? The Federal Reserve, which is the central bank, remember, had raised interest rates from record low levels to fight inflation. Now, this resulted in investors having less appetite for risk as the money available became expensive due to higher rates. Now, this weighed on technology startups who, remember, are the primary clients of the Silicon Valley Bank because it made their investors more risk averse. At this point, you had some of Silicon Valley Bank clients who had already started to pull out money to meet their liquidity needs. Now, to meet consumer demands and to also fund the redemptions, you had the Silicon Valley Bank selling bonds to the tune of $21 billion, most of it considering US Treasuries. But that really wasn't enough. The Silicon Valley Bank then announced a stock sale. But that stock sale also completely failed and collapsed, and this spooked investors even further. Even as the Silicon Valley Bank scrambled last Friday to find alternative funding, you had the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation that announced that the Silicon Valley Bank was shut down and it was placed under its receivership. So the larger question is this collapse really worse than the financial crisis of 2008? Experts think differently. The reason being that even though Silicon Valley Bank was large, it had a unique existence by servicing nearly exclusively the technology world and VC-backed companies. In comparison, you have other banks that are far more diversified across multiple industries, customer bases, and even geographies. Now, this thought does not mean that the trouble is over. Markets have nosedived and investors are still spooked. Asia-Pacific markets stumbled on Tuesday in a volatile session. This after sharp losses were seen overnight on Wall Street. This as investors grappled with the fallout of failed banks, and this included the Silicon Valley Bank. Now, since the Silicon Valley Bank lended mostly to startups, some startups that had ties to this bank could now scramble to pay their workers and may have to pause projects or lay off employees until they can access their funds. But the most immediate problem for the Silicon Valley Bank's large deposits is that the vast majority of these deposits were uninsured due to its largely startup and wealthy customer base. The federal deposit, even though they've given some assurances that deposits will be made available, the problem of uninsurance is still huge. The other problem is that there is no buyer of Silicon Valley Bank as of now. Now, experts believe that the exposure of Indian startups to Silicon Valley Bank could be anywhere between $2.5 to $3 billion. The failure of a bank like Silicon Valley is likely to have an impact on Indian startups, many of which do have significant amounts of funds deposited in this bank. Now, the first big impact will be on the ability to fundraise. Remember, the startups have already been facing a huge challenge. Several Indian startups such as Bluestone, 197 Communications and Bharat Financial Inclusion have exposure. Many Indian startups funded by venture capitalists including Accel, Sequoia India and others also have partnered with this bank. Though there is a breather because now you have the United States assuring troubled depositors that they can begin access to their money beginning this week.
Arun, welcome and thank you so much for staying with CNN News 18.